Okay, everybody, moving on. Today we are going to be defining the actual part of the game which is playable today. So this is actually a little bit more complicated than some of the other things we've done, because we can do a number of different things. But if you just stick with it and go through it, there shouldn't be too many issues at all. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a new function, and we're going to call it battle state. Okay, so we're just calling it battle state because a lot of computer games have a battle state where if it's on, then people are fighting. If it's off, people are kind of like exploring. So if you've ever played like a game where you kind of run into enemies and fight, it will trigger this thing to happen. Is actually what's happening there. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make our own one of those. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually read an enemy into this battle state. So we've already created an enemy select here, and it returns an enemy. So what we have to do, so our enemy is going to equal the name of the function to generate the enemy, so enemy select, and then the three enemies that we want, spelled exactly as they appear above. Okay, so basically I'm just rewriting this bit here. So I'm saying trigger this function called enemy select and select from these three enemies. When this bit gets triggered, it's going to run all of these, it's going to put them into a list, it's going to do the generate the random number between 1 and 2, and then it's going to select my enemy, whether that's 0, 1 or 2. Sorry, generates a number between 0 and 2. Selects the enemy, and then it returns the enemy. When it returns the enemy here, it puts it into this variable here. Okay, so once this runs, this will now equal either goblin, bat or troll, depends on what was randomly selected. Okay, so we're now going to print and we're going to find out exactly what it was that has appeared. So a wild, and then the enemy.name has appeared. And then we're going to do print you have 3 options. Okay, so let's actually just make sure this part itself is working before moving on. So I'm just going to, underneath everything, call the function battle state bracket bracket. Doesn't need anything else to run. And now let's just run it. What should happen is it should get into here, and then it should select an enemy for us, and it should produce that enemy's name. Okay, so wild bat has appeared. You have 3 options, so it's working, but let's make sure it's actually selecting a random enemy. So this should be something different. Well, there's a chance it will be the same thing. So there we saw that the bat appeared again. So let's try again. Hopefully we'll get something different. There we go. So a wild troll has appeared this time. So we know that it is selecting a random enemy for us. So we can get rid of that now because we know it's working. Okay. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually code in the inputs from the user. And there's a couple of different things we need to do first of all. First thing we're going to do is what we call a while loop. A while loop tells the program that while something is happening, do this. So what I'm going to say is that while the enemy's health is greater than 0, do the following. So what I'm saying here is that every time I attack the enemy, I'm going to take some off their health. When their health reaches 0 or below, I will defeat the enemy, and then I'll no longer be battling it because the enemy will be gone. So while the enemy health is greater than 0, I want to fight it. As soon as it gets below 0, this while loop will finish, and I'll be able to move on with the game, do something else. I need to get the user to put in a choice for me, just like before. So I had the 3 different choices. So I'm going to have 1 as a sword attack, 2 as a magic attack, and then 3 as a 3. And again, I put my slashes around the wrong way. It needs to be these slashes. And 3, I'm going to have an option to run away from the fight, which means that if you run away from the fight, obviously, you won't lose any health if you manage to do it, but you won't get any items either. Make sure it's all looking good. Yep. So that's now going to produce those 3 different options for me. So that's actually just going to again call the function underneath it. So I've done it all the way back to the wall here to actually call it and see if it's working. There we go. So my random enemy here, and now I've got my little menu with the 3 different items ready to go. Okay, so run yours now and see that yours is working as well. And if it's not, just check here that you've got it exactly as it appears here. So check your indents, make sure that everything is exact. Okay. Right, now that you have checked that everything is exact, we are going to actually code in these 3 different options. So we said you've got options 1, 2 and 3 here. So if the choice, so if what the player has input here, 1, 2 or 3, that gets saved into this variable here called choice, if that variable choice is the same as the number 1, again we're just going to have this as a string, then we're going to do the following. We are going to print something along the lines of you're attacking the enemy. So I'm going to say you swing your sword attacking the enemy. Actually, attacking the, and then let's actually get the enemy's name as well, because we spent all this time making these classes. Let's actually use them. So you swing your sword attacking the enemy name. So 1 is going to be based off the character's strength here. So the character's strength, and then option 2 is going to be based off their magic ability, because we'll go through that in more detail in a second, because option 2 is for magic. So you swing your sword attacking the enemy, and what we need to do now is we need to generate whether or not we hit the enemy. So we're going to create a variable called hit chance. We use that random.randint again. So random.randint. And I'm going to generate a number between 0 and 10. Now you can make it as easy or as hard for yourself here if you want. If you want it to be likely that you're going to miss the enemy, then you put this next bit, you're going to put this as quite a high number. If you want it to be quite easy to hit the enemy, you're going to put it as quite a low number. So you want to try and get it so realistically you're just sort of below 50%, so about 30%, something like that, to make it quite fair for your players. But you know, it's up to you, it's your game, you can make it very, very hard if you want. So I'm going to do if hit chance, and I'm going to use the greater than 3. So what this means is that if this variable here is generated to a number greater than 3, so I can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so it's 7 different options, so 7 chances for me to actually hit the enemy, and then 0, 1, 2 and 3, so that's 4 chances for me to miss the enemy, so it's just below 30%, I'd say. Okay, so if my hit chance is greater than 3, I'm going to actually hit the enemy. So let's get rid of some of the enemy's health. So the enemy.health is going to actually decrease. Now in order to decrease it, we need to reference it again. I'll write the whole line and I'll explain what it's actually doing. So the enemy health equals itself, so whatever is actually in there at the moment, minus my character's strength. So say this is 30, so I'm saying its enemy health is 30, equals itself, so it still has 30, minus the character strength, which is, so that's 10. So when this comes out, that will now be 20. And next time round, this will be 20 equals 20 minus 10 again. It will go round and round until the enemy's health is 0. It's important at this point, if you're not quite sure why we're referencing the enemy health twice, just think of it as you are starting from the variable, and you need to make sure you are referencing the number that's already there. If you don't reference the number that's already there, you can't take something away from it. Okay, so this is kind of just what we're doing. So in order to update it, we need to make sure that it equals itself first of all. You'll get used to that and you'll understand that as you go on and use it. So let's print you hit the enemy. Their health is now. Now we're just going to generate the enemy's health here so we can see how many points they have left. So enemy.health, that's going to display the enemy's health, and we can make a decision as to whether or not to use a health potion, things like that. So that's if we actually hit the enemy. We're going to, a little bit later, we're going to do what happens if you don't hit the enemy, but we also need to work out what happens if the enemy's health is 0, or if, what happens then. So every time the enemy still has some health, we want them to be able to hit us. So what we're going to do, if the enemy's health is greater than 0, so this is to say that the enemy still has some health, so they're still fighting basically. So if their health is greater than if their health is greater than 0 after we've attacked them, we want them to now attack us. So we're going to do our character.health equals, again, character.health, and it's going to minus, we're going to do something slightly different with what it's minused. So we have a defense stat as well, and we're going to use that to actually work out how much the enemies are going to hit us for. So what we're going to do is we're going to take their strength, whichever strength it is, and we're going to divide it by our defense. So the more defense a character has, the less damage they're going to take. And it's just a good way to say they don't take full damage, and we can increase and decrease defense later on. You can just do it so it minuses the enemy's strength, but that is going to take away quite a lot of your character's health, and it might be that you can't get through as much of the game as you want, and it also means that you can't increase their defense and make them stronger as the game goes on. So I'm just going to get on with this now. We're going to chatting away. So what I want to do is I want to minus the enemy strength divided by my character's defense. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making it so that the enemy strength isn't taking away a massive whack. We're dividing it by the defense, and then we're taking away less. And then later on, if we increase our defense, the enemy's attack is going to be worth less and less. So now we're just going to do a little print statement. Print the enemy. Let's actually use their name. The enemy.name takes a swing. It hits you leaving. And then we're going to write down how much health we have left. Okay, so that's how much health we have left. Now, this is if the enemy has a health which is greater than 0, but what if they have a health which is 0 or below? Well, if that is the case, then we don't want them to be able to attack us. And what we need to do is, when we've been attacking the enemy here and removing their health, because we are going to be possibly fighting the same enemy again, so if we are generating these enemies, we're going to generate them one after another. We may end up fighting the same enemy again. But because of this part here, we're actually removing the health from this part here. So at the end, once you've fought and won, this is going to be set to 0. And that means that the next time you come across a goblin or something like that, their health will already be set to 0. So what we need to do is we need to actually reset these healths. And there's a number of different ways we could have done this, and we could have looked to actually program it slightly differently. But I think this is quite a straightforward way of explaining it. So if the enemy name is a goblin, for example, and this will change for you depending on the enemies you have and depending on what you've called them. I'm saying if the enemy name is goblin, so if this bit here is goblin, it's a good job I checked that actually because I've got a capital G there. I'm going to make them all capitals. So it needs to be exactly the same as this. So if this is the same as goblin, I want to reset the enemy's health to the original value I put for it. The original value I put here was 20, so I'm going to just reset the enemy.health equals 20. Okay, now I do the same thing again for all my enemies. So L if the enemy name is equal to bat, I'm going to reset the health to 10. And then finally, the enemy name is troll, with a capital T for me. I'm going to reset the health to 30. Okay, so that's all that part does. Now, in line with this bit here, so once I've reset them, obviously I've defeated the enemy, so I actually need to reference that, and the enemy has to actually drop some loot because we actually programmed them to be able to drop loot. So we're going to do that now. So we're just going to print and make sure this is in line. So see this is in line with my if and elif statements. It should not come straight underneath this health bit here. It needs to be in the else part, so indented with the else, because this is what happens when the enemy is defeated. So we're going to print now. You have defeated the, and it's going to be the enemy name again, and we'll just print, looks like it dropped something, and we're going to actually call on the loot function. So this function here, we actually want to use this now. So this function here generates a list of these 3 items, applies a random chance to get each one of the 3 items, and then it produces one of the 3. So 0, 1, 2, it rolls the dice, do you get a 0, a 1 or a 2, and this here, that loot chance there is either 0, 1 or 2, and we put that into the position here. So loot, square bracket, and set that's a 0, that means it will select the potion. If in this square bracket loot chance is a 1, that will select the sword, and if in this square bracket loot chance is a 2, that means it will select the shield. So we did lists on the last program. So all we have to do now is just this. Now we're going to take whatever is returned from loot, so see we returned loot drop here, that variable there that gets returned, we're going to save it into this variable here, and we're going to call it loot drop as well because it just makes it a little bit easier. And then we're going to start here with print, and you got a, and reference the variable, not the function. Don't put loot in this bit here because you'll end up with like a string of nonsense because it's not worked properly. And then we break. Now break just takes us out of the loop and puts us into another part of the program. So, sorry, puts us back to the while loop, the original part of the program. Now the next thing we need to do is the else statement. So we actually spoke about here, we had our first if statement, so going back to our hit chance here. So if we hit them, so if our chance here was greater than 3, we're going to hit them, and then it will run all of this, and if, you know, every time basically it does this sort of chance, and it runs whether or not we hit them, then eventually once we get them to 0, it's going to produce loot for us, okay? But every time we go to hit them as well, there's a chance that we're not going to hit them, okay? Because this hit chance here could also generate at 0, 1, 2, or 3. So there's 4 possibilities that we didn't actually hit them. So making sure that we're in line with the if statement. It's a little bit difficult to actually see if we're in line with it or not. So the easiest way to do it is from that break, press enter, and you'll be in line with the else statement, and press the backspace once, and now you'll be in line with the if statement. And it's very important that you get these indents right, or else you're going to have an issue later on. Okay, so I'm going to start straight in with the else, print, and we're going to print your sword slips from your grasp, you fumble and miss. Okay, so we've actually missed hitting the enemy here. Now we're going to print again. Keep it consistent. Print the enemy.name hits you for full damage. So what I'm saying here is that if you miss, instead of us dividing the enemy's strength by our character's defense and receiving less damage, we're actually just going to say that if you miss the enemy, sort of like a punishment for missing is that you're going to get hit with full damage. So you need to be aware of that. So we're going to change the character.health equals itself, just like again, .health minus enemy.strength. So our character's health is going to be take the full enemy strength here. Okay, we're not dividing it by the defense, they take the lot. Okay, that's a bit of a punishment for them. And now the final thing we're going to do is we're going to print out what our health actually is left. So print you now only have, and then character.health remaining. And that is the first choice. Okay, so that is choice 1. So let's actually just make sure that this first choice works before moving on and doing anything else. So now I'm going to backspace all the way back to the beginning. If you can even remember when we started, we're actually programming this called battle state. And I'm going to call it here. And let's actually have a look and see if it runs. Okay, so this first bit is already running, so a wild troll's appeared. We have 3 options, sword, magic or run. So we've only programmed the first option here, so let's just test to make sure that works. Magic and run haven't been programmed yet. So 1, enter. Okay. So the reason that wasn't running is because although I have the battle state, I can't actually run it until I've selected the character because I haven't run the character select bit. So the reason it was coming up there, we can actually see it here. Where is it? So it's coming up with this red text here saying that character is not defined, and the reason that is because we haven't selected a character yet. So we made a function called, where is it? There it is, hero select. And we need to make sure we run this first of all. So just before we run the battle state, I'm going to create a variable called character, and that's going to equal hero select, like that. Now let's, and then we're going to run the battle state underneath it afterwards. So let's try and run this again. Okay, so yeah, of course, so before we actually are able to fight, we need to select what we are. So we've programmed all 3 of these characters, so let's select the top one. Well, I have 3 options, so now I can only test the first one here. So let's test if it's working. Okay, so swing your sword, attacking the goblin. You hit the enemy, their health is now 10. The goblin takes a swing, leaving you with 149.8 health. So you can see how that's divided by the defense there to make it harder for the enemies to kill us in a couple of hits. So let's test the sword again, see if this missing bit works. So we didn't actually manage to generate a miss, but what we've got here is we've hit them again, their health is now 0, it's coming up that we've defeated them, and it looks like they've dropped something, so they've dropped the sword. So every part of the program is working as it should do. Let's actually see if we can fight a couple of different characters. And we can do that by just calling the battle state. We can just call it 3 times. And this will put 3 different fights. And again, remember, we're only testing the sword attack here. So this time a wild troll has appeared, so sword attack. And we can see here, we've now missed. You fumble and miss, the troll hits you with full damage. You now have 145 health remaining. Let's try again. So this time round, we've swung and we've actually hit them, so they now have 20 health. Let's try again. We've hit them again, so they only have 10 health now. Try again. We've hit them again, they have 0 health. We've defeated the troll. Looks like they've dropped something, it was a shield, and then we've generated the new battle. So we've generated a new troll here. So let's check to make sure that the troll's health has been reset. So if we actually attack it, well, we've attacked it, but we've actually missed again, so that's not good. So let's try and attack it again. And what you see here, we've attacked it for 10, and their health is now 20, so the health was reset. So we know that part of the program is working. We've missed again, we've hit, and we've just got rid of the troll there, and it's dropped a potion. So we can see we've actually managed to drop all 3 different items now. Next one's a bat. We've missed it. We've hit it. It's now 0, and that's the 3rd enemy. So the 3 battle states are complete. So that's option 1, all programmed in, ready to go. In the next video, we're going to go through option 2, and then we're going to finish it off with the else statements that happen afterwards. Okay, so I'll leave this up here so you can pause the video and have a proper look at it all. Leave it like that, so you can see all of the code. And if yours is looking exactly like this and you've tested it, there shouldn't be an issue. But if you're having problems with it now, check through the lines that you're given and read the error messages you're given, and make sure that yours looks exactly like this, or else you're going to have some issues. Okay, so next one we're going to do choice number 2. So remember, when you're testing as well, you're only able to test the sword swing at the moment because we haven't programmed the magic.